Unity Santa Fe. It's Sunday morning. And so because of our audio challenges unrelated to me not turning on my microphone last week, some of you didn't hear the reopening prayer, and so I was asked if I would do it again. So I invite you to just take a moment and hear these words as your words through my voice. Divine Creator, we celebrate our doors reopening and our return to in-person services, and for the technology that allows us to also attend via our cyber sanctuary. As we celebrate the joy people feel in coming together, we remember that Unity Santa Fe is not a building. Rather, it is the people of our spiritual community. We feel gratitude in our hearts for the option to connect in person again and the feeling of safety and security in doing so. We are glad now for the prayers, the message, the music, and the consciousness of our staff, sacred servers, and attendees in person and online as we make necessary adjustments. We also allow ourselves to feel any sadness in our hearts for the world as we knew it being gone, and for the hardship experienced by so many during the pandemic and even now. We are especially glad now for unity, a positive path for spiritual living that prepares us to walk into the new normal with our hearts unified. We are glad now that the tender moments of seeing someone again in person and our interactions are more rich and more treasured and with more intentionality than ever. We are glad now that we come out of this pandemic better, not bitter, more considerate of others, more mindful of how we can support one another, and more willing to serve our community and our world. And we are glad now that no matter how dark the night has been, the dawn has come. We are glad now, in the name and after the nature of the indwelling Christ that is our divine nature. And so it is. Amen. authors who I've had the privilege of meeting and have admired over the years is a man named Alan Cohen. And Alan says, if you want to find God, hang out in the space between your thoughts. If you want to find God, hang out in the space between your thoughts. And then I ran across several other related quotes that I want to share with you. One is from Deepak Chopra. He says, the space between your thoughts is a window to the cosmic mind. The space between your thoughts is a window to the cosmic mind. And then someone who's unknown said, you are not your thoughts, you are the space between your thoughts. You know, our second core value is awareness with a capital A. It doesn't mean just it's awareness as a noun. Awareness itself. That's the space between thoughts. That's the gap that I'm going to be talking about when I talk about minding the gap. And Eckhart Tolle says, pay attention to the gap between two thoughts, the brief silent space between words in a conversation, between the notes of piano or flute. I didn't plan this, okay. Or the gap between the in-breath and the out-breath. When you pay attention to the gaps, he said, awareness of something becomes just awareness. The formless dimension of pure consciousness arises from within you and replaces identification with form. So instead of identifying with form, we can identify with that consciousness, that space, that gap, that awareness that is our true essence. So my purpose in today's message is to support you in appreciating the space, the gap between thoughts while meditating. And the human condition is, how many times have I heard myself say it back in years past, and some of you say it, that I can't meditate because I keep thinking, right? Anybody relate to ever having had that happen to you? All right. Well, guess what? You know what happens? Thoughts happen. Thoughts happen beyond our control. And you are never going to be able to control what you think. Now, you can control changing that thought from an old thought to a new thought when you're conscious enough to hear yourself thinking that thought. But you can't stop thinking, per se. So if that's been your excuse for not meditating all these years, knock it off. Stop it, as Bob Newhart says. So that's the human condition. But the spiritual solution is minding the gap, that space between thoughts while meditating, minding the gap. So why should you do this? What's in it for you to mind the gap? Anybody got any ideas? Why should you bother listening to today's message? What's in it for you? Yes, Jerry.
Peace.
Peace. Yeah, when we mind the gap, that gap is peaceful, no matter what's going on in our life. Peace. Anybody else? What's in it for you?
Freedom.
Freedom. Yes, thank you. Freedom. There's freedom in that space. Freedom from stress. Freedom from all those things that aren't peace. Yeah. And freedom to be still and listen. Yes.
To receive.
To receive. Yes. Yeah, in that gap is, we talk about, some people say prayer is talking to God. and meditation is listening to God. So when we are silent, we actually can hear. But you're going to find out something very interesting about what happens during silence in that regard later on. Okay. Well, I looked it up, did some research, and people who practice mindfulness, and I say this for myself, I've heard other people say it, but people say it fundamentally changes how they experience life. I mean, would it be okay with you to fundamentally change how you see life? Sign me up. So, and then there's mindfulness research. That's just hearsay. But mindfulness research suggests that our human capacity to observe ourselves, which they think is limited to human beings, but who knows, that the human capacity to observe ourselves and our surroundings non-judgmentally, and in the Unified Mindfulness I trained, we called it equanimity. So to be able to observe ourselves and our surroundings non-judgmentally, equanimously, and with compassion has deep and nourishing effects on our well-being. And that, when we let that nourish our well-being, it ripples out beyond us into our daily lives, and the people we interact with feel it. They experience it. And there were a list of 11 research-backed ways that mindfulness meditation training may improve your health and well-being in the following areas: anxiety and depression, immune function, brain protection from declines due to aging and stress, mental clarity and focus, less mind wandering, heart health, enhanced mental health treatment. People who are undergoing mental health treatment have benefited from mindfulness. It slows down cellular aging. That's why I look so young. Okay? Self-confidence and leadership, mood and sleep. But that's not enough. There are 8 science-backed ways mindfulness helps us heal and thrive from burnout, addiction, suicidal behavior, bias and harassment, team dynamics, worker and personal productivity, focus and attention, creativity and innovation. And it helps people deal with chronic pain. So, I don't know about you, but any one of these benefits sounds like a good enough reason for me to mind the gap. But here's another reason that I have to be the best of all the rest. Having more space in your thoughts means you have more room for your true essence to shine through. I'm going to say that again. Having more space in your thoughts means that you have more room for your true essence to shine through. So I think that's how we go from letting this little light of mine shine to letting my big light shine, and yours. Now, where does mind the gap come from? Anybody know? The phrase mind the gap, yes.
I think it's the undergrounds in London.
Yes, that's right, the underground, the tube in London. And what mind the gap is, it's an audible announcement or a visual warning used in the tube, the London Underground Railway system. And so when a train arrives at a station, passengers are told to mind the gap. In other words, to take caution while crossing the spatial gap between the train door and the station platform. So all over London, you see these signs. There's mind the gap. The gap that I'm encouraging us to mind in today's message is in the meditative, is the meditative gap. So spiritual masters throughout the ages encourage students to not only recognize the gap, but be in it. So when we mind the gap, we not only recognize it and identify it and become aware of it, but we realize that we are it. We are. Our true essence is the gap. So in unity, we call the gap, anybody know? The silence. Okay, the silence is what we call the gap in unity. And Paul Hasselbeck in Heart-Centered Metaphysics says several things about it. He says, silence is a state of spiritual consciousness to which we may retreat from the relative realm of sense consciousness. In other words, we can withdraw from the world. It's a place where we can go and be focused on spirit instead of the material world. He says the silence is a state. Now, this is what I told you I was going to tell you later, a few minutes ago. Listen to this carefully. The silence is a state in which there is no experience of time, space, or sensation. You only know you have been in the silence after returning from it. So if you're sitting in the silence and you see brilliant lights like the Aurora Borealis or whatever, that is not the silence. If you're sitting in the gap and you get a rush of really warm feelings, that is not the silence. The silence is pure emptiness. You don't know you've been in the silence until you come out of it. And then you go, have you ever had that experience? You come out of meditation, it's like, wow, where was I? That's the silence. And so, I remember early on in my unity, as a unity student, I wanted there to be absolute silence when we were meditating. And for a while, we were meeting at the lodge, and they put us in the ballroom on Sunday, and it was right next to the kitchen. And the workers in the kitchen were throwing silverware, flatware, across the room into metal bowls. I'm sure they were. I don't know this for a fact, but that's what it seemed to me. And I was not equanimous, okay? I was not non-judgmental. I was very irritated and frustrated because I was trying to be silent. Okay, well, you can be silent in the midst of anything, okay? The silence is always there, and it's not conditioned upon what's happening within our human auditory range. So that's the key thing I want you to remember, is that it's pure silence. Yes?
Could you just repeat the definition that you said in the very beginning of this?
That it's a state of spiritual consciousness? That one?
That it has what it doesn't have.
Oh, okay. The silence is a state in which there is no experience of time, space, or sensation. So that bubbly feeling, some of you have taken my mindfulness meditation class, and one of the techniques we learn is called flow. And we feel the flow of sensations in our body, but that is not silence. That's awareness of sensation. It's very important because it helps us develop concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. But it's not the gap. It's not the silence. It's good, but it's just a distinction between the two. Was that helpful?
That was it, thank you.
Great. Paul says that in any experience of a voice, guidance, or answers is the effect of having been in the silence and does not actually occur in the silence. So whatever guidance or answers we get after meditating, they come as a result of having been in the silence, not in the silence. And one of the purposes of the silence, he says, is to open up the mind to new avenues and paths of consciousness, leading to illumination, awakening, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And the result of dwelling in the silence is that in reality, there may, God, hate to tell you this, there may or may not be outer change. Our eyes are simply open to what has been eternally true. We are not who we seem to be, hard and solid, flesh and blood. We are really spirit, divine mind, Christ. So when we are in the silence, we are experiencing our true self, our invisibility. Now, so the gap is the silent space between thoughts. It's the space where the mind seems to stand still. No thought exists in the state. It is in the gap that you experience present moment awareness, wisdom, and joy. So part of the reason that I'm doing this unified mindfulness training right now is that the more I can be aware of what is happening in the moment in terms of what I'm seeing, hearing, feeling, the more I'm getting attuned to the present moment. So that I can then at some point, experience the gap. And we experience the gap. We're just not aware of it, right? It's happening all the time. There's a gap between my sentences. So there's always these gaps happening, including in our thoughts. But through mindfulness, we become more mindful of it. We become more aware of it. And we can be, our spiritual life can be enhanced by it. So you might wonder, how can a space between thoughts be possible if my mind is incessantly thinking? Anybody other than me have that question? Well, this incessant stream of thinking, this mind chatter, in Buddhism is called what?
Monkey mind.
Monkey mind. Monkey mind. I never understood it until I went to my first 10-day silent retreat, in which we could not only not talk, we could not make eye contact, we could not listen to music, we could not read, we could not write. We had to totally immerse ourselves in silence. And let me tell you, I understood what the Buddhists meant by monkey mind, because it was incredible watching my mind. It was life changing. So the human condition is that thoughts happen, as I mentioned before. But what we have to do is realize they're constantly, happening, and we just have to let them go. We just have to observe them and not jump on board. If you're sitting by a river stream and you're seeing ships go by or little boats go by, that's one thing. Jumping on board them is a whole nother. So our goal in meditation is to watch the thoughts go by and not jump on board and become the captain, and try to control it. So Eckhart Tolle suggests that the reason we do not mind the gap, the reason we're unaware of the space between thoughts, is because our consciousness has been so mesmerized by experience and identified with form that it's not aware of inner space. If you look for the gap, you will not be able to find it because it's not within your conscious control. Okay? The gap arises, but we don't tell it when to arise. We can't find the gap. All we can do is allow it to arise and notice it when it does arise. But it requires, guess what? Concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity. Tolle also suggests that you don't need to be concerned with the duration of those gaps. A few seconds is good enough. And gradually, he says, they will lengthen themselves without any effort on your part. And more importantly than their length is to bring them in so frequently in your daily activities, and your stream of thinking becomes interspersed with space. Okay? So you just start noticing them. You can't make them happen, but you can make the effort to notice them, to be aware of them. And the thing to, the caution, the thing to watch for is that idea that I covered before, thinking that in the silence, these incredible spiritual experiences are going to happen. And they may happen as a result of being in silence, but in the silence, there is no sensation. There's no words, there's no guidance. So if you hear something, feel something, that's not it, okay? So, how are we going to mind the gap? And we know that the first way, the first how-to every Sunday that Brendalyn is in the pulpit is prayer and meditation. So being in the silence is a practice, it's a spiritual practice. And so in Unity, we're not real big on, I mean, we do affirmative prayers, we do denials of things that we do not want to have power over us. But our real prayer is the silence. That's what prayer really is. And so the basics in the silence are to not seek for experiences or demonstrations. Let it go. You're not there to have, that's the other thing happens. People go, oh, I'm meditating. Nothing happens. So guess what? In 12-step work, we say that expectations are premeditated resentments. Okay? So when you have an expectation, you're going to be resentful that you invested all that time. You spent 5 minutes and nothing happened, Or you spent an hour and nothing happened. Well, get rid of the expectation, because that's what sets you up for not being equanimous. You have to still the mind, okay? And one of the ways to still the mind is by just allowing it to do what it's doing and not striving or efforting or straining. So when the thoughts arise, you just say, oh, you just let them go. You don't jump on that boat and go down the street. Same thing, words, feelings, they come up. You just observe them equanimously and let them go. And you engage the mind. And this is what I love about unified mindfulness, is that, for years I did Vipassana, Goenka style, and all we did was scan the body. We started with Anapana, and we would just focus on the breath coming in here and out here, the tiny little space. And we did that for 3 days, 10 hours a day, okay, to develop our concentration skills. And then we started scanning the body from the head, 1 inch at a time. Scan the body. Just be aware of whatever sensations. And that's basically the method. And I would get so bored. I would get so bored scanning the body. So then after 6 or 7 years, I took transcendental meditation and I got a mantra. And I got so bored with the same mantra over and over again. And years before that, I had centering prayer where I had a sacred word that I got so bored and tired of it. And what I love about unified mindfulness is I can use any of those. I can have a sacred word, I can have a mantra, I can have body sensations. I can choose what I want to focus on. And I can choose based on whatever the situation is that arises. So you can engage the mind by concentrating on the breath, by concentrating on body sensations, by concentrating on a mantra, a sacred word, or what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling. And I like that because it's right here, right now. Right here, right now. My senses are telling me what I see, what I hear, what I feel. And Eckhart says that when you're conscious of breathing, he said, when we are conscious of our breathing, we are absolutely present. And our being conscious of the breathing, guess what, folks? Stops the thinking. Now, didn't I say you couldn't stop your thinking? Well, it's sort of like Mario impressed us today with being able to play the flute and the guitar and all that at one time. But the point of it is that we really don't do that well. And so if I'm occupying my mind focusing on my breathing, then the thoughts don't have room, okay? So that's the idea behind see, hear, feel, scanning the body, the mantra, whatever, is to occupy our mind, to engage our mind. Shinzen Young, who is my meditation teacher, invites us to take a moment to concentrate on your breathing. And notice, I want you to do this right now, if you need to close your eyes. Notice that at the top of the inhale, there's a space. There's a gap where the inhale ends and before the exhale begins. And then as you get down to the exhale, there's a gap. There's a space where the exhale ends before the next inhale begins. So that's a wonderful practice if you want to learn how to mind the gap and to be able to see where it is. And that's true of other sensory experiences, but you got to take the class to learn about that. Anyway, so attend closely, concentrate, and that's what I want you to do during the meditation today, is I just want you to focus on the gap at the top of the inhale and the gap at the bottom of the exhale. And if you're breathing too fast, you're going to miss it, because it can be very slow. So as we meditate, our breathing slows down. So that's going to be your assignment. So in closing, your call to action today is to mind the gap. And you can create space between you and thoughts, space between you and emotions, space between your essence and your ego, space between you and pain. And in that space, you allow ultimate creativity to be unleashed. And I don't know who wrote that, but I thought it was good, so I added that. So let's begin experiencing this right now, being one together in a sacred time of shared prayer. I'm going to see if I can hear this beautiful bell. So I invite you to stretch up, relax the shoulders and jaw. Clear the mind and open the heart. And just spend the next few minutes focusing on the space, the gap, at the top of the inhale, at the bottom of the exhale. There, no matter how subtle it is, you get distracted, start thinking about something else, bring your mind back to the gap. The space at the top of the inhale, the space at the bottom of the exhale. And let's do that and experience our oneness together in the gap. And as you gently bring your attention back to this time and place, silently say, thank you, silence, pure silence, for the wisdom to mind the gap. Thank you, pure silence. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That it is so, and so it is, and so I am. And did you mind the gap between the notes? Do you know that those candles are going off and on constantly? Yeah, the gap. You just have to look for it. And so now we have an opportunity to give as your grateful spirit leads you. So please join me in our love offering blessings. In a universe overflowing with unlimited abundance, all the needs of Unity Santa Fe and those we serve are bountifully met from every direction, known and unknown, expected and unexpected. Our abundant good comes to us now. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all I am, all I have, all I joyously give, and all I joyously receive. Feel that joy, feel that gratitude, feel that generosity. Allow it to permeate every cell and atom of your body, your heart, your soul, your mind. Allow it to radiate beyond the body, creating a field of energy, of gratitude, joy, and generosity that attracts more and more to be grateful for, joyful about, and generous with. Amen. Amen. his sight. The
light of God I am surrounds me. The love of God I am enfolds me. The power of God I am protects me. The presence of God I am watches over